Good afternoon, Commissioners. Ainsley Caldwell, Pavement Management, Public Works. This is a hideaway trail traffic calming project, and there's one street involved in this project. There are two traffic calming devices to be installed. The estimated cost is $13,000, and the maximum assessment unit is $368.44. This is just an overview of the votes. We had 84% responding to the petition, 75% was in favor of the project, and 25% voted against the project. And this repayment is over 5-year period, a 5-year period at 4.25% interest. And that's just some notes on the voting, because it's a little bit different from our regular PVAS projects. This is located just east of Seven Springs, and that's it. There's no photographs needed for this presentation.
Mr. Oakley, I think you're chairing right now.
Okay. Public hearing. Do what?
Does anyone want to speak on this?
Speak on this item. Come forward.
Sir, please state your name and address for the record, and also whether you have been sworn.
Steve Hoskins, 7316 Hideaway Trail, and I have not been sworn in.
Okay. Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Basically, we just have a ton of speeding. It's been going on forever. We're connected to a back portion of the neighborhood, and literally they fly up at about 45 to 50. So I don't think there's any opposition to it, but just want to let you know that I'm for it.
No opposition to the PVAS?
I don't believe
Ju-
so.
Well,
Just
I think
speeding?
there were-
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, this is my district,
you.
so I would move approval.
Let's make sure that there's no one else.
Is there anyone else that want to speak to this item?
Seeing none.
Seeing none?
You'll-
I make the motion to approve this.
Second.
Motion been approved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion approved. Next item?
Publication is on the Tampa Bay Times for item P16 on July 20th, 2018.
Commissioners, this is a Pebble Beach project, PVAS project. There are 3 streets in this project. The estimated project cost is $269,078. The equivalent residential unit is $3,281. The discounted amount is $46,770, and the maximum cost per ERU after the discount is $2,711.
Okay.
In terms of the vote count, there were 82 possible votes. 67% were responded to the petition, 51% were in favor, 49% were against. The repayment is over a 10-year period at 4.25% interest. And that's just a location map. A couple photographs of the conditions of the streets within the project. The staff is recommending approval.
Now this is an approval, but they voted it down?
They voted for it.
Vote for it.
For
Well,
it.
I thought I saw, what percent they vote for it?
51.
51%.
61?
51.
51? Oh, okay. I thought I saw it was opposite, so, thank you. Or is anybody here to speak to this item?
Good afternoon. My name is Tom Rennings. I live at 13102 Pebble Beach Circle. The streets to be paved run in front of my house. I just want to say our 30-year-old streets do need to be replaced, and I applaud the effort made by the paving committee, and I hope you'll approve the motion.
Okay, thank you, sir. Is anyone else to speak to this item?
Seeing no one, move approval.
Seeing no one, or need a
Move approval.
motion?
Second.
All right, got a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Pass.
Yeah. Got to finish.
Go ahead if you want to continue. We have proof of P17.
Do we have to change the tape?
Publication for item P17 is the Tampa Bay Times on May 6, 2018, and by affidavit of certified mailings and postings on site.
Good afternoon, Coral and Howell, Planning and Development. The next item is P17 Serengeti rezoning petition number 7308. Before we go into the project, I'd like to give the clerk some ex parte forms that didn't make it into the packet.
Can we get a motion to receive and file those, please?
I move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. So Serengeti is located on, I didn't even forget where I am.
Just off Hayes Road.
Hayes Road, between the Suncoast Parkway, north of State Road 52. Proposed is a rezoning request from MPUD to an MPUD to allow 229 single-family detached dwelling units on 296.13 acres. This is an increase in density of 59 single-family dwelling units from the original rezoning that would allowed 170. Minimum lot size proposed, I think, was changed, so we won't discuss that. Here is a master plan proposed for the area. Phase 2 is the one in the rear near the Suncoast Parkway. So the site currently contains Phase 1, which has 95 platted lots. Phase 2 is currently undeveloped, but the infrastructure for Phase 1 and 2 already exists. So Phase 1 and 2 infrastructure is complete. That means the roadway's in, the power boxes are in, the electric's in. There was an approved preliminary construction plan for Serengeti in which Phase 1 is platted, so that's a vested portion. Phase 2 was never platted, which has expired. This is why the MPU is coming forward. Variances were approved with the preliminary construction plan when Phase 1 and 2. One of the variances was a tree sampling survey, and the other variance was payment into the tree mitigation fund, which they already paid. So they're vested from those items in the land development code because of the approval for Phase 1. At the DRC meeting on June 21st, the PDD current staff members took the recommendation forward to the DRC as a denial, but the DRC approved the applicant's request with a vote of 3-1.
Can I stop you?
Yes, you may.
Can you back up? Oh, not that far, just the one slide. Go forward or back one more now. Okay. So you're saying the planning development, current plan recommended denial of the increase in density at the June 21st, 2018 DRC hearing, then DRC approved. What was your recommendation? Why did you recommend denial initially? And you're recommending approval today.
My next couple of slides will go into that.
Okay.
For why PDD recommended denial.
Okay.
Oh, and there they are. So PDD current planning team denied the density increase based on the following issues. In the Land Development Code, 402.2.f and 402.1.e, impact of the proposed development on the surrounding area. The impact to the surrounding land uses would be detrimental to those platted lots that already exist, the 95 in Phase 1. When first approved, Serengeti Phase 2 was approved for 69 lots. They're proposing to increase Phase 2 to 134 lots. When they were, all the infrastructure that was built for Phase 1 and 2 was built for 164 lots, 95 in Phase 1 and 69 in Phase 2. So the infrastructure's in, but it wouldn't support the additional 59 units.
Can I ask a question on that? What, are you saying the road doesn't handle it? What infrastructure does not handle?
So in the Land Development Code, we have a tier of streets, Type 1, Type 2, Type 3, Type 4. Each street has a hierarchy of how many lots travel on that street. So, let me see if I have a plan here. So let's say there's a Serengeti Boulevard is the main boulevard which comes through. So I'm going to say a Type 2 street is I have it written down. It has 11 foot of pavement. So a Type 2 street carries so many units, okay? A Type 2 street is supposed to carry between 101 to 200 units. A Type 2 street is a 50-foot right-of-way with a 12-foot pavement. So this was built in accordance with what was approved. So the Type 2 street for Serengeti goes, I think, up to about here. And that, where that red arrow, where that circle is there. By rights, if you're going to add the additional lots to Phase 2, the Type 2 street would have to be taken to about there. So that's an increase from 1 foot of pavement from there to there, because right now it's only a Type 3 street. I know this is a lot of numbers and everything, but it's all about pavement width. So Type 3 streets have 11 feet pavement, Type 4 streets have 10-foot pavement, and Type 2 streets have 12-foot pavement. It's to carry the traffic.
And you're talking about per lane, right?
Yes,
Per
per
lane,
lane, thank you. Thank you, Jeff. Per lane.
How wide is Type 2?
12-foot.
They're all 50-foot right-of-way, and it's a 12-foot, one paved lane, so it's, 12, 20, 24.
Commissioner Starkey, you
Yeah.
okay. Commissioner Oakley? So when it starts Phase 2, you're saying it goes from, instead of being a 12-foot lane on each side, it would be 11-foot, which would be down to 22-foot total, right?
Right, it would go from 11 to 10 to the rear. So in the rear here, where these smaller streets are, like, see it ends in a cul-de-sac,
Right.
those are Type 4s, so they would only have 10-foot paved.
But in the county, if I'm not mistaken, Prospect Road is less than 11 feet. right now.
Prospect, we can't, this is apples and oranges.
Okay.
What
Is the
about
road
Longley?
built different? Is the
Pros-
road built different?
Prospect is supposed to be one of our collector roads, it's supposed to be 142 feet wide.
Well,
Commissioner Oakley, Prospect was built before we had the standards that Cortland's talking to you about.
oh, okay.
Oh,
How,
thank- that's
So-
good.
The 11-foot road won't hold up the additional traffic you're saying going to the back?
No, all I'm saying is that when the infrastructure was built for Serengeti now in 2006, 7, whenever it was built for that approval that happened in 2005 and 6, or I have it written down. So the infrastructure was built for 164 units. That's how it was built out for,
For total,
total,
front and rear?
right.
But
So
the
while I'm,
90, you got 95 of those on the front, right?
and 95 is
In Phase
fine.
1?
95 is fine. It's the additional units in Phase 2 that they're asking for that throws the count over.
69 in phase one.
Yes.
69 in phase one.
So if it was still remained at 69, this would be just fine. They could go in, start selling houses, fix their lots, move in, get this approved, get new construction plans approved, go. But if they're gonna come in and they get an increase to the 134, then there's gonna need to be more paperwork for them to process in order to get their construction plans approved, which is alternative standards.
Okay.
Because the streets aren't built to carry the additional,
So if they built additional, the extra foot on each side of that road for the Phase 2, then that would meet that criteria and that wouldn't be a problem?
yes, they could fix it, yes, of course,
Okay,
absolutely.
all right.
And just so I'm clear, it was plotted for this, Phase 2 was plotted for 69 lots, but the plot expired, correct?
So Phase 2 was never platted, only
Never
Phase
platted,
1
sorry,
was
yeah.
platted. So Phase 2 was never platted, but it was approved for 69 units on the construction plans.
Gotcha.
Is this where I was? So, whether the proposed change will adversely affect immediate and surrounding neighborhoods. Within the immediate neighborhood, there will be an increase in traffic due to the additional number of units proposed to 59. The residents presently in Serengeti were under the assumption that there would only be 69 lots in Phase 2 when they purchased their lots. The applicant is now proposing 134. With only one major street for access, which is Serengeti Boulevard, the increase in traffic will directly affect those residents that live already in Phase 1. So they have an additional trips coming through their development that they never intended to be there. They only thought that 69 were going to be there, that's fine. Everybody was happy. Whether the proposed change might result in lower property values in the adjacent areas. The applicant is proposing reduced lot sizes of approximately 5,500 square feet. The platted lots within Phase 1 are close to a quarter acre. The homes within Phase 1 are valued from approximately $250,000 to over $350,000. The small lots will less likely be valued at a lower rate, which will affect those home values in Phase 1. As a comparable for the proposed lots within Phase 2, lots within the adjacent subdivision, Lone Star, have been valued at from approximately $125,000 to $180,000 per the property appraiser's office. Lone Star is the subdivision directly and abutting the south of this development. Whether the proposed zoning change, whether the property is rezoned could be developed in a manner which complies with governing regulations. The subject property had received a prior MPUD rezoning to allow 170 dwelling units. The property also had received a preliminary construction plan approval for the development of 164 units. The density was already approved and was found to be consistent by the Land Development Code and the comp plan at that time. So therefore, the 170 dwelling units could be developed in a manner which complied with the zoning regulations and state regulations as is. Whether maintaining the existing zoning classification accomplishes a legitimate public purpose that protects the integrity of the goals, objectives, policies of the comprehensive plan, the public's reliance upon the existing zoning or another legitimate public purpose as determined applicable by law. Keeping the density at 170 dwelling units would accomplish a legitimate public purpose because the residents in Phase 1 of Serengeti had relied upon an approved construction plan showing 69 lots on larger lots in Phase 2. So when the residences of Serengeti Phase 1 came to buy their lots, they were shown a plan They were shown a plan.
Objection, I don't know how the staff member knows what the residents were shown by the developer.
You'll have,
She wants to be there.
you'll have time to speak in just a moment, sir.
Object on the record.
Continue, please.
So the comprehensive plan, considering of existing development patterns and approved development in the area. The development pattern in the immediate area is larger lots. Phase 1 of Serengeti was approved for 95 lots, which are approximately a quarter acre in size. Consideration of environmental and cultural features and community characters. The character of the development was less dense with larger lots. The proposed higher density with smaller lots is out of character for the area and the community. Phase 2 density increase is from 69 dwelling units to 134. There's public reliance on an approved plan of development. On August 11, 2005, the DRC approved the preliminary construction stormwater management plan for both Phase 1 and 2 of the Serengeti development. Although the previously approved MPUD for Serengeti allowed for a total of 170 single-family detached dwelling units, the plans were only approved for 164. The public relied upon this approved plan of development for the Serengeti development would have a total of 164 dwelling units on larger lots. This is the approved construction plan for Phase 1 and 2. This is the proposed concept plan for the additional units in Phase 2. So it's virtually, almost lots are cut in half. So with that, like I said, PDD staff's denial to the DRC was based on those facts, but this is coming before you with a DRC recommendation of approval with conditions.
Does anybody have any questions for?
Can you please tell us what the conditions are?
There's a lot of them. Did you want to, and Mr. Two's going to go over some of the newer conditions. Did you want?
Definitely go over the newer conditions.
Yeah, because the older conditions, most of them were based on the previous MPUD, but there are some new conditions, and Mr. Two is going to, has some changes to them, so he'll bring them forward.
Any questions for Corlin? Okay, the applicant or applicant's representative?
Mr. Chair, before the applicant gets up, you've agreed to give the applicant 1 hour and the opposition attorney 1 hour. That includes
Nope,
any
they don't
rebuttal
take
time,
1 hour.
cross-examination time, expert witness time, anytime. They got to decide how to use it, but they only get an hour, and Nicole's going to be keeping time.
Sir, if you could state your name and address for the record and whether you've been sworn. In addition, could you restate your objection for the record? I'm sure we didn't catch it.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. Joel Two and Associates, Land Use Council, Palm Harbor, Florida. I represent the owner and applicant, which is Dune, Florida Land 1 Sub LLC. My objection was that the staff member was purporting to testify under oath to the board as to alleged representations made by the prior developer to the property owners that the staff owner can't possibly have personal knowledge of. So I don't know where they got that information, where she had it, but she simply has, it wouldn't be substantial competent evidence because she has no ability to know that. She wasn't there, and to my knowledge, she is not a resident. So that's the objection for the record. I want to back up and start at the beginning. We do have some housekeeping since we have an objection represented by counsel. They have a court reporter, not my court reporter, but I want to make sure the record's complete in case there is a challenge to this. I do want to incorporate by reference the DRC record that we created. We had a lengthy 2-hour plus DRC hearing where all the objections were made, staff position was made. This was thoroughly vetted by your Development Review Committee. I believe it was, in fact, its last official act, probably much to its chagrin, having to listen to it, but it was the last act of your Development Review Committee. And the fact that you have a Development Review Committee recommendation for approval before you, where it was voted upon by your county administrator and your department heads, most of whom are here today, who supported us, and that your staff continues to argue against the recommendation, is probably the poster child for why it's a good idea that you have eliminated DRC and gone another route. So kudos for that. Obviously an uncomfortable position because your administrator and department heads respectfully disagreed with Ms. Howell and her position. With that said, before I get into the substance, I'd like to note that when this was initially presented to staff, I was not involved because it was not controversial. Staff actually indicated they would support this for the record, and only later decided they wouldn't support it after there were community objections, and the applicant was told specifically that the only basis for the reversal in that position was that there were existing resident objections. And obviously, DRC weighed all this and came to the opposite conclusion. I also want to incorporate into the record the PowerPoint that I'm going to go through. We provided an electronic file of that. It is the same PowerPoint we used at DRC, but I want to make sure the record is clear that our PowerPoint is included in the record. And then when I get to the point in time after the background presentation, we do have some proposed revised conditions that are in direct response to one-on-one commissioner meetings that we've had as allowed by law, documented by disclosure forms, attended by the Chief Assistant County Attorney. But we received many questions, several requests, some different ideas and suggestions to try to respond to things that either had been expressed to commissioners by residents or were concerns of commissioners independently. Some of which overlapped and some of which were different. So you're going to see a smorgasbord of requests collectively made by commissioners that we're going to make every good faith effort to adequately address today. We did prepare these revisions in advance with the county attorney's office and with Ms. Howell, and staff has signed off on the wording and the structure of those conditions in the event you see fit to approve them. So they have been vetted with your county attorney's office. They have been vetted with your staff for your consideration. But now I'd like to back up. Before we get to that, I'd like to talk about the overall, if we may. This project is a request for an MPUD modification to add 59 residential units in Phase 2. With new lot dimension requirements. Now, those lot dimension requirements have morphed based upon inquiries from commissioners since the DRC approval. The DRC recommended approval of a 50-foot minimum lot width with the standard dimensional criteria that we had submitted, but again, capped at 59 additional units. The existing MPUD was approved at 170 lots. We're proposing to go to 229, a total increase of 59. The project is in a Res 3 district, which allows nearly 500 units. I'm going to show you the slide with that count. We're requesting an increase to 229 when the underlying land use district allows nearly 500. And that's counting only the developable uplands with no credit for massive wetland areas that I think most of you are aware of. That's just looking at the net developable acreage. We could get almost 500 units. If staff is correct, for example, that my zoning has expired as to Phase 2, which I disputed at DRC because I think arguably we're vested, and that I hopefully could convince the board to prove a vested rights determination, but if staff is correct, and we have no zoning on Phase 2, then I could come back and apply for a standard Res 3 zoning with townhouses as you just approved at the project before me, and as have been approved all over the place in the last 3 or 4 years in every zoning I've done in front of you, which has been dozens, with 50-foot lots and townhome units. So we either have zoning or we don't have zoning. Now, we agreed at DRC to put aside that debate, and what we really want to do is to do what DRC did, to approve the MPUD so that it is reinstated, work out a reasonable solution on Phase 2 to get the project out of the quicksand, which brings me to the first point. This is simply a stalled development project. Like it or not, and no matter how great it would be if we could do something different, the market doesn't care about desires or emotion or anything else. The market is cruel. It's a mathematical equation, and it is what it is. This project was approved in 2004, the MPUD was, right at the front of the big run-up. The construction plans, as Corlin stated, were approved in 2005. Everyone was so ambitious at the time and so convinced that the dream would never end that they did the full construction plans for the whole project, which would never happen today after the lessons we learned from 2008 to 2013. It was originated as a concept not by my client, not by Metro Development Group, its manager. It was initiated totally as a concept by Lexington Homes, who at the time was having some success in Pasco County with these large estate-sized lots. And they're the ones that zoned it. They're the ones that chose to do the whole thing. And things went south in 2008. They went bankrupt. The bank took it back. Lexington had gotten Metro to develop the lots for them. Metro got hammered. They lost $16 million on the initial subdivision. The land and subdivision infrastructure cost was almost $17 million in the ground out there, never to be regained. Since 2006, when the construction was done, in 12 years, there are 22 existing homes in the project. Not for lack of trying. God bless the residents who bought and built there. I understand that I would feel exactly the way they feel if I bought and lived there. I understand that 100%, and so does Metro Development. But in 12 years, when only 22 homes are built, the market has told you there's a problem. Now, what is Metro doing? They'll never get that investment back, but they understand and respect the situation the current residents are in. The simple fact is the residents aren't alone there, because Phase 1 on the left demonstrates that, yes, there are 22 homes that are constructed, but there are still 57 lots in Phase 1 owned by the applicant. This applicant still owns 60% of the lots in Phase 1. In addition to the 22 homes, there are 16 vacant lots in Phase 1 without homes built, but 13 of those appear to be owned by a single investor entity that is not building houses. Someone apparently bought 13 investment lots, probably on the cheap, to sit on them until something can be resolved. So Metro is stuck with 60% of the Phase 1 lots. And the way they approached this, they didn't come in and ask to try to retool everything. They said, look, we're all in this together in Phase 1. Metro committed on the record at DRC. They told me to reiterate here today, they're committing on the record. They're going to ride it out in Phase 1 with their 57 lots, their 90-foot lots. They discounted those to $25,000. They've even discounted them to $20,000. They have closed on 2 of those year to date. They are spending about $20,000 a month on television advertising and have been doing so for several months. So they're spending a couple $100,000 a year in advertising to sell 2 $25,000 lots per year. That math doesn't work. And so what we're going to have to do, if we can't figure out a solution, they're simply going to shut the project down. They're going to wait until either the market does something different or some other solution is found and they're not going to continue to invest in the project. They can't. They're going to continue to invest in the other projects they have with you, the economic development projects, the other communities, and keep trying to help build Pasco County. But this project will not be feasible. It is not feasible. As to what people were promised, this is a copy of the actual recorded deed restriction that was recorded back at the beginning. In 2006, it covered not only Phase 1, but also Phase 2. It covered the entirety of Phase 1 and Phase 2. And if you look at the very first page, Section 2.02, the commitment was that each residence in the total community would have a minimum living area of 1,800 square feet. I have read the deed restrictions front to back. There was absolutely no representation as to minimum lot size. There was no representation that any product would not be changed or that the world would not change. And as you know, I personally, despite doing this for 39 years, the last 20 being in your county, I am not aware of any MPUD that I ever worked on that we did not come back and do an amendment on. It simply doesn't happen. Everybody takes their best guess when they're approving hundreds of units, where the market's headed, what will work, but invariably the market determines what happens. But the only representation that was made was 1,800 square foot minimum living area. This product is being advertised by Avalon Builder, not related to Metro. They're an independent builder. They have lots in Serengeti Phase 1, and they are advertising a number of products, 3 or 4 different price points. This is the lowest price point, the smallest size, but this home exceeds the minimum square footage in the deed restrictions and is being marketed independently. That's going to happen with respect to the lots that Metro doesn't own. We can't control that. So regardless of what is done for the Metro lots, other people that have lots in Phase 1 can build anything that's 1,800 square feet or larger. Now, Ms. Howell discussed some code provisions talking about consistency with surrounding neighborhoods. And that is a very good point, and I'm glad she brought that up. This exhibit shows you 10 existing approved communities in the immediate submarket, in the immediate planning area, the same planning area, that have approvals, and Serengeti is virtually in the middle of those. I'm going to read off. The next exhibit has the details, but I want to leave the picture off. I'm going to read off from the next exhibit the minimum lot sizes, which are approved in every one of the adjacent subdivisions, no exception. Lakeside, to the west, 40-foot lots, 41-foot paired single-family or attached homes, 16-foot townhomes. Legends Point, our adjacent neighbor to the west, right across Hayes Road directly, 55-foot lots. Lone Star Ranch, our immediate neighbor to the south, 50-foot lots, 60-foot townhomes, 16-foot townhomes, and 16-foot single-family attached. So 50-foot single-family, 16-foot attached, and townhomes. Suncoast Lakes, just to the south of 52, 50-foot lots. Greenfield, just northeast of us on the exact opposite side of the expressway with the same expressway issues that we're going to have in the back. 50-foot lot, 60-foot lot, 40-foot lot, 16-foot townhome. Plantation Oaks, to our west, 50-foot lot, 80-foot duplex lot, essentially a 40-foot individual lot. Meadow Oaks, just to our west, 45-foot to 70-foot lots and 25-foot single-family attached lots. Quail Ridge, just on the other side of the Suncoast, 25-foot single-family attached, 50-foot single-family lots. Deerfield Lakes, 50-foot lot, 70-foot lot, 25-foot attached, 16-foot townhome. Cypress Preserve, 40-foot lot, 45-foot lot, 50-foot lot, 55-foot lot, 30-foot attached, 16-foot townhome. In short, every one of the 10 projects you have approved, the closest 10 projects you have ever approved to Serengeti, had the exact minimum lot size and the type of lot mix that we're proposing to try to get out of this quagmire. So we're not doing anything inconsistent with the neighborhood. In fact, we are the anomaly in the neighborhood. We're the fish out of water because we're the only community we can find approved in Pasco County that has exclusively 90-foot lots. The only one. And that's why it's sitting here, unfortunately. This is the detail that I just read to you. Now, the question about lot values, because a lot was said about that, home values at DRC, and you're going to hear it today. Rather than speculating on, I think my house is worth this, or I think my house is worth that, or oh gosh, this is going to depreciate our values, we did our best to find actual empirical market data to present to you factually so that you can draw your own conclusions as to what this is likely to do to existing values. These are the actual existing property appraiser assessments, just value in Serengeti for every lot and every existing home. We got them from the property appraiser. We asked the property appraiser, so I know the statute says appraise at 100%, but we all know that that isn't exactly done. What do you do if you really want to approximate fair market value? They said gross hours up by 15% more, and you'll be in the ballpark. We did that. We grossed them up by 15%, and they demonstrate that the average current home, and this is an average of all the values, is $368,000, and on a per square foot, on a per heated square foot basis, that existing home lot package, now this is the house and the lot, is $113 a square foot. So we said, okay, and we went to a qualified market appraiser, not a broker, not a speculator. We went to Marty Engelman at Tropical Evaluation Advisory in Tampa, and we, without giving him any direction, we said, Marty, we need you to go pull actual comparable sales. We're not talking about listings. We want actual comparable sales in every one of the surrounding communities, and we want you to tell us two things. Get us a comparison of market velocity of sales based upon various lot sizes to see what's happening with the 50s versus the 90s. And we want you also tell us what do you find is the combination lot home value in the surrounding communities that I just read to you for the 50-foot lots, for the homes that are on 50-foot lots, because the argument we were getting is if we have 50-foot lots, it's going to devalue my home on my 90-foot lot. And so he pulled that. The first thing that's most instructive is this exhibit as to this is the actual sales velocity in the previous 12 months. And if you look at the top, Lakeside, which I pointed out to you, just west of us, had 109 actual closings in the last 12 months. Lakeshore Ranch had 88 actual closings in the last 12 months. They had those with 50-foot lots, whereas Serengeti had 2. We had 2 lot closings while they're having 109 and 88. And when you look at this graphic and see that Serengeti doesn't even register on the bar chart due to lack of velocity. And again, these are based upon actual sales. That's not us saying, oh gosh, we can't sell, the 90s aren't selling, the 50s are. This is the market telling you that 90s aren't selling, but that 50s are. So then we took it to the next step to get to that per square foot price. We said, okay, Mr. Appraiser, I want you to pull up Lakeside Phase 1, Lakeside Phase 2, Cypress Preserve, Deerfield Lakes, and Connerton. All communities in this portion of the county that have mixed lot product. And he computed, based on actual sales in the last 12 months, what a 50-foot lot with a home package, our 50-footers with a home package, what was the actual price per square foot that those buyers received in comparable communities. And it's amazing. It goes from $96 to $115 a square foot, with 3 of the 5 being at $112, $112, and $115. Now, why is that interesting? Is the house on the 50-foot lot, the market is telling you, has exactly the same value as the lots in Serengeti on the 90-foot lot. That also tells you why we can't give away a 90-foot lot, because there's no incremental value to it. And in addition, like the one gentleman said on the earlier matter, a lot of these purchasers want that nice house in a beautiful community like Serengeti. They don't want to mow the grass. And for these size lots, you have to give them a John Deere tractor as their closing gift. A toaster doesn't help. You'd literally have to give them a John Deere tractor at the closing to mow the yard. And most people don't want that. John Deere might like it. So then we have the detail, the backup. He dug way into Cypress Reserve, if you're interested, Lakeside 2, so that you can see that it's actual comparable sales. But that's the answer. Now let's get to the issue at hand. The issue at hand is, what are the pros and cons, unfortunately, of having an existing Phase 1 in a community with larger lots that is partially developed, and a phase in the back that isn't built with homes at all, fully developed, full site development, but not built with homes. And the way to get there is the entrance through the existing larger estate-size homes. This is the poster child for that. It's the Lakeside project just west of us. And the interesting thing is that on August 23rd, 2016, almost 2 years to the day from us standing here, this county commission, this very county commission, approved a Phase 2 redo, a Phase 2 modification to convert it to these smaller mixed lots. And it has Phase 2, you guys approved it, right in our neighborhood. It has 40-foot lots, 55-foot lots, 80-foot lots, 41-foot villas, and 60-foot lots. So they came in with exactly the smorgasbord that we're talking about, driving through the existing larger subdivision. Now, go back and look interestingly at the velocity chart. Guess which one is number 2 on the hit list? Lakeside Phase 2. So in just 2 years, since you modified that for them in Phase 2, they shot up to over 100 closings in the last 12 months after being stagnated. So what that demonstrates is you made a very good decision on Lakeside Phase 2. You were correct. You helped solve a market problem. You did it in a responsible manner. Now, we discussed this at DRC, and I'm going to concede that if we had the reverse situation, where if the large lots had already been built in the back, and the front part was the part that we hadn't built, and we were now trying to downsize the front part to smaller lots so that everyone coming to these larger lots and homes had to drive through the smaller community, I think that would be a less desirable situation. So we were kind of lucky that Lexington started where they did, and it may have been entirely luck. We're also lucky they didn't build it all in the back. But the good news is, coming into the marketing window, you've got these big, fine lots and these beautiful homes and this beautiful community. And if you're an existing resident there, unless you meet a new friend on the back 40, and hopefully they will, but unless you meet a new friend back there, you and your own house guests don't ever have to drive back there next to the Suncoast Expressway, because you don't have to go there to get to your home, and neither do your house guests. So I think it is a fortunate circumstance that that's the way geographically it's laid out. And let's talk about that a little bit. We have on the Phase 2, the unbuilt home section, we have an issue being up against the Suncoast Parkway. Now, that never became an issue in Phase 1 because it has such physical separation. But the truth is, it probably would have been hard to sell those estate homes in the back next to the expressway, even if the market hadn't collapsed in 2008. That probably wasn't the smartest thing to plan. And if we were coming in here today, if Corlin is correct that I have no zoning on Phase 2, and I got to come in and start from scratch with my Res 3 land use, we're certainly going to draw a land plan that now makes sense, that has smaller townhome, more dense product, at least in 1 or 2 rows next to that expressway, and then a mix of 50, 60-foot lots in front of that. That's how we would all design it. You guys approved those every county commission meeting, and you've approved them all over the county for the last 3-4 years. That's how you would design this. So for us to say that we will keep everything in Phase 1, Metro will sit on those 57, 90-foot lots in Phase 1, ever how long it takes to sell them, if you'll just give us enough relief in Phase 2 to do what the market is telling us is necessary, that which is entirely consistent with the surrounding 10 communities, including the one you last approved in December of 2016. Then we think we can get out of this. Now, here's the other thing before I get to the revised conditions. Here's the other thing that we think will actually happen. It is not our intention to do harm to the existing residents, because it also is not our intention to do harm to ourselves for our existing 57 lots there. We have a 60% stake in Phase 1. And if we honestly thought that we were going to destroy the ultimate value of those lots, if we can build this value back, those are worth more than the new lots will be worth in Phase 2. So we would not be doing, if in our professional development judgment, we thought this was going to destroy values in Phase 1, we wouldn't be doing this because it would make no sense. But what's going to happen is we're going to get what is currently a hot product market. We're probably going to get some empty nesters if they don't need a John Deere tractor. We're going to be able to open the demographic, have some younger professionals move to the back with young families, and we're going to talk about how we accommodate that, and some empty nesters. We're going to get some traction. There'll be models. There'll be traffic coming in to see them. A lot of people are going to drive past that beautiful large lot area in Phase 1, seeing this traffic, and they're going to say, you know, that's really nice back there, but it's kind of next to the Suncoast Expressway, and it might get a little loud. And by the way, those are really some beautiful big lots in the front, and they're going to spin around after they get the brochures from the model, and they're going to go back to the front and say, you know what, maybe we can actually afford one of these. How much are they? That's what's going to happen here. And as they say, a rising tide floats all boats. We've got to find the catalyst for the rising tide. And we're not saying this is the perfect answer, but it darn sure is the only one we've been able to come up with. Is, you know, as they say, is the economy stupid? Don't argue with the market. The market's going to beat you. If you think you're smarter than the market, you've lost again. So that's where we're going. Now, if I can transition, as I said, we were able, I think because it was reasonable, I made exactly this substantive argument to your DRC members, and they agreed that although it wasn't a perfect world and it was unfortunate for the existing residents in the situation, that it could either sit there the way it is, dead in the water, never to change, or we can try to do something to fix the problem. And your department heads concluded that we're going to try to help fix the problem. And so they've recommended to you that you do that. Despite that, because we knew we still had resident opposition, we met with each of you individually, as you know, with the county attorney, and I heard from you different items that concerned some of you, and that you thought would be responsive to some of the issues you had heard from residents. So we went back based upon your specific questions, your specific suggestions, and in some cases, some very specific requests, including some strong arm twisting. And we went back and we rewrote these to respond specifically to those items. And with your permission, I was asked by the county attorney and staff that I be the one to distribute these, which I'm happy to do, if you would be kind enough to receive them into the record.
Move to receive.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Commissioner.
And just as an aside, while we're settling in to look at these, I went back and looked at the zoning history to talk about how the market changes and how trends change. And you'll see this actually if you look at the details in the staff report. This very property was approved in the mid-'80s for a mobile home park. So the world does change. And at that time, obviously, no one thought any the better or less of it. All right, in response to the direct inquiries that we received from commissioners, we have made changes which fall into 6 simple categories. So without getting lost into the weeds on the wording, and again, the wording has been vetted by the county attorney's office and staff, and they both are okay with it if you see fit to make the changes. The 6 substantive items, starting from front to back. Condition number 9. In Phase 1, to meet the neighborhood park requirement for the total subdivision, we created a very large passive recreation park area. And because there's so many wetlands and so many set-aside areas, there's actually a large 6.5 acre parcel that was set aside and committed to be a passive recreation park area, 6.5 acres. Well, the whole, even at our 229 units, we're only required to have 2.29 acres. So we already had 3 times that number. However, it's heavily wooded, it's beautiful, and it's perfect for passive recreation, but it's not cleared. And so the concern was that the LDC now presently requires you to have, as part of your neighborhood park, a completely cleared 10,000 square foot minimum open play area. And so the request was made. We know you've already dedicated 6.5 acres for the park, but it really doesn't provide the open play area. Plus, we're thinking that in the back, as I said, we may now draw some young professionals on the smaller lots at a competitive price entry. So we have agreed and committed in the conditions that in Phase 2, we will add a minimum 10,000 square foot open play area that meets the current code requirements. And that will be in addition to the 6.5 acre park that's already present in Phase 1, and it will be accessible by car and pedestrian and bicycle from both phases. So there is an additional open play area, including anyone that moves into Phase 1 that has kids. So that's item 1, a new open play area. Item 2 was a specific request that we get very aggressive on, number 1, the obligation to connect to the Suncoast Trail through that back phase. And at Commissioner Mariano's suggestion, hopefully with a board resolution, to the Expressway Authority to encourage them to actually approve that, including the county as a co-applicant. This condition obligates Metro to build that connection, to do it in the way approved by the county, so that during emergency events, the county can require it to be locked if required, if there's a fire, if there's an accident, et cetera. But we're obligated to make that connection. That's item 2. The third request, which I know at least came from Commissioner Starkey, and I think 1 or 2 others, Commissioner Mariano, I think, I got this at least twice, was if we're connecting to the Suncoast Trail, then they went back and they looked at the approved construction plans, and this was approved without what would be your current pedestrian bicycle trail requirement for a minimum 8-foot trail. So we were asked, and Metro has agreed, to actually go back and retrofit Phase 1 from the main entrance on Hayes Road through Phase 1, through Phase 2, to the trail connection by either revamping and expanding one of the existing sidewalks or building a totally new trail on the other side. But either way, we'll have an 8-foot bicycle pedestrian trail connection all the way through. That was item 3. Item 4 was Commissioner Mariano's request, strong request, that we provide some off-site sidewalk mitigation on Hayes Road. And down at the Public Center on 52, actually at the Withlacoochee facility just north of the Publix, the sidewalk was extended up by Withlacoochee to their northern boundary. There's then 4,300 feet of missing sidewalk on Hayes Road if you go all the way to our project's northern boundary. And Commissioner Mariano has requested, it's, like I said, 4,300 feet, it's almost a mile. It's going to be a substantial expense, but the county attorney's office and staff is supporting bicycle pedestrian mobility fee credits if we'll spend the money to do it. And Metro has committed in the conditions now to build that off-site sidewalk as a precursor to Phase 2. That will get us to the north boundary so that you then, I think, just have one more property going north, maybe a couple to get to the high school. So it's obviously a good idea to get that sidewalk going, and we're happy to do that. Then turning internally to what we can do to help respond to the concern of the residents, that the 50-foot lot width, it's unfortunate that that's how we need to measure it, because that's what gets everybody excited, is the 50-foot lot width. So we looked at it, and as you know, it's just a good argument that the way you determine lot minimums is by lot square footage and overall lot size. And so what we did is we came back, we have tremendous depth on these Phase 2 lots. They're not going to change because the millions has already been spent on the road and the utilities and the electric. So that pad we have, it is what it is. So what we did, and this was a specific response to virtually every commissioner asked us this question in the one-on-one meetings, could we make a commitment and could we better clarify exactly what these lot sizes would be? And we said, yes, we've got to go back to the engineer, we've got to do some calcs. And so we did that. And so we are proposing to do 2 things in Phase 2. Yes, we need to stick with that minimum 50-foot width just because of the lineal distance we have and the cul-de-sacs to deal with front lot. But we agreed to do 2 things to try to create a better aesthetic and to have a less of an in-your-face feel, to make it look aesthetically like they were a larger estate. First thing is we substantially increased the front lot setbacks. We're proposing and willing to do 35 feet to the garage. To my knowledge, I've never had a project in Pasco County that had as much as a 35-foot minimum setback to the garage for residential and 30 feet to the residence itself. So we're willing to push all of those in Phase 2 back so that you get a bigger, a more open feel when you're driving through there. Secondly, we're prepared to commit, and the conditions reflect that not more than 10%, which would be 22 of these, no, will be 13, because we have 134 lots in Phase 2 if we're approved. So not more than 13 lots would actually be less than 6,000 square feet. And of course, 6,000 square feet actually is your standard 60-foot lot, not 50-foot. So you're going to have virtually no lots that square footage-wise are truly what you know as a 50-foot lot. And we'll have not more than 10% that are less than 6,000 square feet. We will have not more than 40%, which are less than 7,500 square feet, which is your typical 75-foot lot. And we commit in the conditions that at least 60% of the Phase 2 lots must be 7,500 square feet or larger, which would be a 75-footer or bigger. We also know from the estimate that the engineer gave us that if you truly average the average lot size in Phase 2, if we have a 50-foot front, the average lot size, because of the depth there, will be 9,500 square feet. And we, in fact, will have 38 lots, nearly 1/3 of the lots in Phase 2, that will be a 1/4 acre or larger, which is the size of the square footage in Phase 1. So we're getting hammered for needing a 50-foot front lot minimum, when I think the fair analysis is these will be mixed lot sizes. They will be substantially larger than a standard 50-foot lot. They'll have an additional front setback, and it's going to create a nice appearance. So we're happy to meet those requests that various commissioners have made. We certainly hope that's sufficient. It's going to cost us, let's say, several $1,000s more for the trail and the off-site sidewalk. But because we have nowhere to go now except down or nowhere, we're happy to do it if that's a reasonable compromise and we can move this forward. So with that said, we'll hold the rest of our time for any rebuttal. Mr. Lawson is here and will be happy in rebuttal to address anything that needs to be covered after the residents speak. And we ask you to follow the recommendation of your Development Review Committee as its last final act. Please don't reverse them in their last final act. And approve this with these additional conditions that we presented in response to individual commissioner suggestions. Thank you.
Any questions for Joel?
I think I'll wait. I was going to wait.
I got one question.
Yes, sir.
Did that concern the applicant as far as the road being 11 feet rather than 12? That just comes up.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I meant to address that. Thank you.
Okay.
First of all, I don't recall Corlin arguing that specific item at the DRC hearing specifically. I do recall it coming up in either a staff comment or something we got before DRC. I looked at that before, and I asked for the specific code reference that they were relying upon. I read that code reference, and it didn't say that, and I responded and told them that. So I want to reserve my right that that's not what it says. However, if that is what it says, then we will do exactly what was acknowledged in the questioning to you, that obviously when we come in for our construction plan approval, if that is an accurate, legitimate requirement now, then we have to do one of two things. We either have to get an alternate standard approved, which is in the county's discretion, or we're going to have to add a foot to each side of those roads when we're building the trail and the sidewalk. So the short answer is, if that's a requirement, we have to do it. And it'll just be an additional cost, but we'll do it if the alternate standard isn't approved. But again, I reserve the right to debate that because I did look at the code section she gave me. It did not say that when I looked at it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Real quick, Joel.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
Well, I just wanted to, it was interesting, so I just texted the Thomas Deeb, who was the developer of Aristida. He was the contractor and part developer. And I asked for the width of the road in Aristida, because it's kind of similar, because it's one long road. And the width of the road in Aristida is 20 feet, no sidewalks. So everybody's in the street. And it's 20 feet.
So that's 10 foot on each side, right?
10, 10. Yeah.
And of course, our construction plans were approved. I mean, we built what was approved, but like I said, if the current requirement is different, and if we can't convince everyone that it's reasonable to do it the way it is, then we have to do it.
Joel,
No, go ahead.
let me ask you a question now, and I appreciate you taking the time to meet with me. I didn't meet with the residents till after we sat down, which I told you. Have you spoken to the residents or the representation of the residents, their attorney, to present these things, to kind of maybe work it out before we got here today and putting this in front of us?
I heard through the grapevine that
But I mean, have
they-
you personally spoke to them or?
No, I have not. Now, I'll explain why. I only heard through the grapevine that they had legal counsel because Todd Pressman represented them at DRC. And I'd talked to Todd before DRC. So I did not know directly that they have counsel, and the counsel did not reach out to me. We also were told, frankly, at DRC, that short of building the 90-foot lots, they weren't interested. So, you know,
You don't know if you don't ask. And again, I'm not saying that you're right or wrong, I'm just asking, so.
yeah, and the flip side of that is if they've hired Ms. Hatley, I know her, I did cooperatively, we did a zoning project in Luch. She knew where to find me, and she's worked with me before, and we've resolved issues before.
Well, Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Moore.
since everybody else is asking a question, Joel, I'll go
Yes,
ahead.
no problem.
I'll go ahead too. So you mentioned in your new, sorry, I had to start wearing these the last couple months here. So
Join the club.
it's all hitting me now.
Moving off.
Yeah. You mentioned the lot size. Let me find where I'm going here. Sorry, 1 second here.
You need the condition?
Yeah, what condition is that again, please?
Yes, sir, it's on page, it starts on page 8 in the
Okay.
red line at the bottom.
Okay, I got it. Thank you. So I guess my question is, Joel, then, why the need to add 59 more?
Well, okay, good question. If you're only going with 50 footers, okay, you can fit the 59 more. What we're telling you is when you do the math of 50 footers in there, given the depth of those lots, we're giving you the math on how big those lots really are. Because that was the question we were asked. We were saying, yes, we have lots that are 50 foot wide, but they are really big 50 footers, which sounds like an oxymoron, but they are big 50 footers because they are so deep. So if we don't get relief on the lot width, we can't achieve any additional density. As long as we're stuck at the 90-foot width, we can only get what we have. So we have to go to a minimum 50-foot width. But when the engineer lays those out and plats them, what you're going to see is even if they're 50 foot in width, you're going to see that the total square footage in that lot are the numbers we have committed to. That the lots are going to be the square foot size of most of them 75 footers. Because all the lots you approve everywhere, everything we've done the last 3 or 4 years, every project I put up here, if you look at those dimensions in the exhibit, those are 50 by 110, those are 60 by 110, those are 70 by 110. That's how big the standard building lot is in the Pasco County market. These lots are going to average almost 200 feet deep. That's the other logic in pushing the house back. If you have that depth and you've still got room for the pool in the back and the kids to play in the back, push the house back, get them back off the street so that when you drive through there, that house, anything closer to you looks bigger and tighter. So if you get it back, it's going to create more of a visual appearance that there's more room between the houses. That's the idea.
So let me continue on with something else too. So you said, you met with all the commissioners and some suggestions were given to you and you were willing to make some additional investments. Have you spoken, well, you said you haven't spoken with their council, but I met with yourselves, I met with the residents, some of the residents, I should say, that came to the meeting that day. One of the conversations I had with them, and maybe this will come up later, I'm not sure, is that, I think you and I had this conversation briefly, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe we didn't, when we met, but blocking off, I think we did, right? So blocking off phase 1 and phase 2. Since you're willing to make such large investments on the trail, on the sidewalks, on a park, what do you guesstimate the investment would be to build an additional entrance north, which could connect to, I think that's word is Kilimanjaro, or
Kilimanjaro,
Kilimanjaro. See, these glasses aren't even working for me.
Serengeti, Kilimanjaro.
Get glasses that don't even work. Yes, in that area.
We do not own that tract to the north. We can't build a road across somebody's land we don't own.
I understand.
And that's therefore not a viable option.
How long do you think that?
Pardon?
How long do you think it is from Hayes Road to Kilimanjaro?
Oh, wow. Probably almost a mile, 3/4 of a mile. I mean, that's probably a $2 million road before you, plus go buy the land from somebody that doesn't want to sell it to you because they're going to want to develop it one day. So they're not, plus look at the $16 million we're already sunk. We were required to improve Hayes Road and add all those turning lanes and build that entrance. And so the discussion we had was alternate access. There's existing access to the south that the staff has as an emergency access. And our position on that is we were asked to make an emergency only by staff and the residents. We made it emergency only. If somebody wants it open, we're okay with it being open, or we're okay with it staying as emergency. We just need to be told what to do. But
where's that connect to?
It goes through Lone Star down to 52. But, then you're going to have the Lone Star residents, although the truth is you require every community to have cross-access. You
Where
make
does it
me do it
connect
in
to
every.
phase 2, Joe?
Pardon?
Where does it connect to in phase 2?
It comes out of the very southeastern part of phase 1.
So it doesn't, that doesn't help
Right.
at all.
There are a handful of lots. There are a handful of lots in phase 1 that would be affected, that are owned by others. A small number would be affected in the southeastern part. That's why, we're willing to do whatever. But the community was obviously developed with the intent of being a unified community. The homeowner association is for the entire community. The trail, why would we connect a trail from phase 1 to the Sun Coast if it's not going to be a unified community? We certainly will not build a sidewalk down Hayes Road if we can't go through phase 1 to get to our new sidewalk. So, I just don't see that as a viable option. I appreciate the effort and I appreciate the concern, but it's simply not a practical solution to build a new road to the north through property that we don't own or control. We couldn't afford to do that. We wouldn't restart the project if we had to build a new road like that.
That's all I have for now.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
One other thing.
Oh, good.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
Okay. You're setting back 30 feet for the residents and
35 on the garage.
35 on the garage. Is that, how much more is that than the setback already?
Full 10 feet, both.
10 feet,
Full 10 feet, both.
right? So most of the lots you're talking about in the second phase are a lot deeper than 100 feet. They got to be 130 or better.
They're virtually all, we counted, Mike and I counted, and I actually worded it that way. The lots that are 130 or deeper, we've committed to that additional setback.
Right.
And Mike says that he only has literally a handful of lots, probably 5 or less, that aren't at least 130 deep.
Oh, okay.
They basically go from 130 to nearly 200.
Yeah.
So we're going to have no problem pushing
So
those
you're going to get
back.
good space in front of the homes, and you're going to provide those homes with more lot, actually.
Exactly,
in the
much
back.
more lot.
Yeah.
Still have room in the back for a pool and a large play area for the kids if
Right.
they want it. And probably they'll definitely still need that John Deere tractor.
Yeah, a lot of people don't want to do a lot of mowing.
That's the reason I moved to my townhouse on Lake Tarpon. I was tired of mowing that other yard on the golf course. I just wasn't interested in that anymore.
Commissioner Mariano?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And the board asked most of the questions I was looking at, but Jill, let me ask you a question. When you had your market analysis done by the Marty, I guess, down in Tampa, of the ones you listed, you left out Lone Star as far as the comparisons. And the reason I mention it is just in the staff analysis, when it compares the Lone Star to this, I'm just wondering why that was left out as part of your analysis. or his analysis?
I think he was looking at what he thought were the most comparable in terms of the quality of project. And so the ones he pulled as the comparables were the ones in the immediate area that had the 50-foot lots that he thought were the most comparable product. But we can get that data.
Mr. Chairman? Sorry. While you're up here. I appreciate it. So tell me a little bit more about how Phase 2 has been marketed. So has Phase 2 been marketed at all? Because obviously, and I went out there and took a gander too, and you know, there's no lots divided. It's
Correct.
It's just grass.
They did everything other,
Weeds.
right, they did everything other than draw the lot line and plat it. That's exactly correct. I'm gonna let Mr. Lawson introduce himself since he's in charge of that process for Metro. And he can talk to you about what efforts they made to try to move Phase 2 and also his continuing efforts to market those lots in Phase 1.
Yeah. So, because the reason, let me just continue real quick. So, because the reason I ask is that if it's very, in my opinion, this is my opinion, it's very hard to sell a product when it doesn't look somewhat finished, i.e. the lots aren't finished, it's not mowed, it's not being kept up with. So, in my opinion, it'd be very difficult to sell that product when it doesn't look like it's actually being taken care of.
Well, I can actually take a stab at that one because I get hired all the time to go contract for land that looks like Starkey Ranch before you had any houses, that's not even zoned. Right, beautiful property. But I guess what I'm getting at, a developer builder that's in this game, which is the buyer for a Phase 2, they see all beyond that. That what they're interested in is location, lot size, and is my infrastructure there. So a builder that's going to go in there and build Phase 2, they are not confused or bothered at all by the fact that that land back there, the grass may not have been cut last week. Because every piece of property they look at has wetlands and trees and pasture, and it's just a big line on the GIS map. We're not trying to one-off now, if we were trying to one-off retail lots to home buyers in the back, then yes, I mean, I can see that point.
Right,
But
so that's
Phase 2 is a bulk sale to a developer. Builder is going to, right.
That was kind of my point.
Oh, yeah.
That's why I asked you that question.
Right,
So
no, it's a bulk sale.
So in reality, the only product that's been marketed so far has been Phase 1.
Not correct.
That's why I'm asking. Okay,
No, they've
so
been trying to sell Phase 2, trust me.
as the total.
Of course.
As a
bulk
not-
sale.
But you're still selling individual lots in Phase 1.
We're not going to get into the trap in Phase 2 that we when we bought it, Phase 1 was there, so it was what it was. But we're not going to get in the trap on Phase 2 of doing one-offs on 90-foot lots, and the minute you got two buyers, then nobody's going to let us change Phase 2. So thank goodness there's been no sales in Phase 2. But we can't possibly start doing one-off sales in Phase 2. We see how one-off sales worked in Phase 1 so far, and, not good. But Mike can address the bulk. You want to talk about the bulk sale market?
Mr. Chairman, while Mr. Lawson is coming up, while Mr. Tu has indicated in the beginning of his argument that he disagrees with staff's position, if their MPUD plan has expired, they really couldn't market Phase 2 as individual lots because they can't move forward with platting, they can't move forward with construction drawing. They have to come to you for an approval of some kind, which they're here for today.
Mr. Chairman, just to disclose, I saw some of the acknowledgements in here, so who we met with, but I met with the residents twice, and I met with the applicant twice.
So your name and address for the record and state that you have been sworn.
I have been sworn. I'm Mike Lawson. I'm with Metro Development Group. I'm located in Tampa, Florida. Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, good afternoon. In regard to Phase 2, the infrastructure was put in back in '06, '07. It was never platted, and in our world, we look at it as a partially approved piece of property. When we're talking to builders, we have nothing for what product we wish to sell being a 50-foot minimum, and again, that's a minimum width. These lots are going to be different widths beyond 50, plus or minus. But until we have entitlements that we can sell that type of product, we can't really talk to builders because we don't have entitlements to sell the product that they're interested in buying.
When did this expire initially? Again, what? Mr. Steinschneider, do you know? Since
I don't know.
I thought it was 2017. It's in the findings.
it was either, so with last year? Or 14?
I think, you talking about the MPUD or their MPUD?
Well, I'm referring back to what Mr. Steinschneider stated a second ago.
August 11, 2017,
Yeah, 2017.
When, what month?
August.
So last year, okay.
So when you have a platted piece of property, then a builder can enter into bona fide sale contracts with home buyers. So we are churning through phase one. We are very actively marketing this project, and certainly I would love to show you our efforts during the rebuttal. We're advertising on television, we're doing Facebook, we're doing direct mails, we're on our Metro Places website, our Metro Development Group website, have been for a couple of years, and it's still a very slow sell. We're, like Joel said earlier, we wanted closing on, so far this year, just 2 lots, which has been the consistent pattern on this property, on the 90-foot wide lots. But we're going to stay committed to phase one. I think phase two, given a product that's more competitive on the surrounding market, and I think Mr. Engelman's approach also was looking at more active projects as well, Mr. Mariano, versus Lone Star, which has been completed for quite a while. Okay. But we can look that information up and follow up with you on that if you wish.
Mr. Chairman, just a follow-up question.
Yes, Commissioner Moore.
Thank you. Mr. Lawson, so so Metro itself has sold 2 lots this year. Has anybody else sold lots? Because there's some other owners.
I don't know if the investment owner of the 13 lots, if they've sold any lots. They've owned them for several years, and my understanding, there's nothing been sold there. We haven't looked on the property appraiser's records recently if there's been any movement of those lots out there.
So it's Avalon that's building on your lots?
Yes, Avalon is under contract with us to sell our lots. The model home they're using, we constructed for them to help with their capital expenditure, and we are aggressively giving them abilities to discount their homes, discount the lot packages, to get momentum going in this project. Phase two, with a higher density product that's more conducive to market conditions, will allow us to continue our commitment and stay in phase one lot sales. We know that with the additional sales traffic and velocity that the phase two product will offer, is going to create more traffic internally, and it's going to move the 90-foot lots faster as well, which is, we all want that in the community. But the integrity of phase one will be left as it is. It is not going to be changed in any way.
Mike, can you repeat how much you spent annually to advertise?
Our current contract is running from June through August. It's $42,000, and we are marketing in Northwest Hillsborough County, East Pasco, West Pasco, and Hernando County. And we're going to be extending that contract from August to December, and probably starting in 2019, it'll go through April. We're also doing a large billboard, digital billboard off of I-75 and Fletcher, starting today. So, and I've seen the commercials.
I'm asking, I live close, I haven't seen it, but I believe you, I'm just asking the question. I didn't get the number earlier when Joel was here. Any other questions for Mike?
Can I?
Go ahead, Commissioner.
Just a follow-up. So, Mr. Lawson, so you mentioned you have a contract now through August to advertise. Just to follow up with Chairman Wells' question, and you think that'll be extended through April of 2019?
Yes.
And that's for television?
Television.
Television, okay.
Yes, $20,000 a month.
And that's just for this product, just for Serengeti? Or does
Just
that
for Serengeti,
include
that's strictly that's just for Serengeti commercials.
Just Serengeti?
Yes.
By itself?
Yes. And I have,
April.
and I can show that during rebuttal. I can show you actually the
I
advertising
trust you.
schedule.
I believe you. I'm trying to look at dates, though.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so through April.
We've been advertising, and we've been on television commercials for months.
Okay. When did you start advertising on TV?
It was several months ago.
So this year?
Yes, yes.
So we started advertising on TV this
Yeah,
year?
it's been on the Metro Places website for nearly 2 years.
Okay. But started advertising TV a few months ago, in 2018?
That's my understanding.
Okay. All right.
So just so I understand, so you're saying you didn't start advertising for Serengeti until June of this year?
No, before June. It's been several months for television advertising.
Okay.
We've been advertising, we've been doing direct mails, we do Facebook sales. We have it on our Metro Places website, which is
I mean,
very-
as far as the 42,000 a year, that's something you just started this year?
Yeah, it's probably about 8 months in total so far.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, so we're going to hear from the other attorney?
We are.
And then there's rebuttal, and so we can ask more questions?
Yep.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Reserve.
we don't count the question and answer time towards their hour, so I think
Understand.
they have about 16 minutes left. The applicant has about 16 minutes left for rebuttal.
Okay, thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Okay, if the resident's attorney would like to, or representative would like to come forward?
We're going to have to break because we're not going to be able to make.
Yeah, we will, yeah, I think we will.
Thank you, Commissioners. I'm Pamela Jo Hatley. My address is 14517 North 18th Street, Tampa. I represent Jim Truex, who is a resident and owner in Serengeti. He owns 15715 Serengeti Boulevard. Before I get into my presentation, I need to address some things that were stated on the record by Mr. Tu. And starting with something that was stated about the homeowner association, it was represented that the homeowner association declarations of covenants were presented to you on the screen. There was an OR book and page and a date of recording there. Those were not the original declaration of covenants. That was actually an amendment. It said right on the face of the document that it was an amendment. It was recorded in October of 2006. I have the original declaration of covenants, conditions, and restrictions for Serengeti. They were recorded November 4th, 2005 at OR Book 6679, page 601. And in section 2.02, they required the size of each residence to be 2,000 square feet. And I would like to submit this document into the record.
Motion to receive and file.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
For clarification, that was in 2005, then when did it go to 1,800 square feet?
2006.
2006?
Commissioner Starkey, in 2006, the amendment that Mr. Tu showed to the board was recorded October 3rd, 2006 at OR Book 7206, page 1692. It was argued that the Metro Development Group was not involved in planning this community, and that it was actually Lexington Homes that was responsible for that. But I would like to point out the document I just submitted to the record, and also this amendment that you were shown by Mr. Tu, is signed by Serengeti Development LLC, by the Ryan Group LLC, its managing member, and by John M. Ryan, its managing member. So they were indeed involved. And I would like to submit this document to the record. It's the first amendment to the Declaration of Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions for Serengeti.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. This board has to make a decision regarding the rezoning request, and the decision has to be supported by competent substantial evidence. Now, competent substantial evidence does not include argument of attorneys. Florida courts have held consistently that argument of attorneys, we are advocates for our clients. Our testimony is not competent substantial evidence. There was no tendering of any expert witness during Mr. Tu's argument. Mr. Tu did not tender himself as an expert witness in any areas such as marketing, real estate sales, real estate brokerage, economic development, or economics, and yet he made argument in all of those areas. Mr. Tu did not bring an expert witness today to present the reports that were submitted to you on the screen regarding marketing and real estate sales and economics and the impact of any of those things. There was no expert witness here that I could cross-examine or ask questions, or that this board could. I couldn't see the report, I couldn't examine the report, I could only see what was shown on the screen. So I object to that on the basis of hearsay and on the basis that, of due process, that there was no expert witness here behind that report that we could ask questions, that I could ask questions, or the board could ask questions, or the residents of Serengeti could ask questions of. That is not competent substantial evidence. If this case were approved or denied today and went up on appeal, a court would not recognize that as competent substantial evidence. It's simply argument of an attorney. In addition to that, this board has to make a decision supported by competent substantial evidence, but based on the criteria in Pasco County's own local laws, its planning documents, its land development code, its comprehensive plan. The decision you make today on this request has to be based on the criteria in your own code. Many of the items that were brought up in Mr. Tu's argument and that were brought up before the Development Review Committee had to do with issues such as the project being stalled. We can't sell these lots. We haven't sold lots here in a long, long time. We wouldn't have designed this community this way if we had done it to start with. We would have put mixed-size lots in here. These are not relevant. These are not criteria in Pasco County's code or its comprehensive plan. They're not criteria on which your decision today has to be based. So those issues, while compelling, but perhaps compelling because the developer is arguing that if we don't get this approval, we're going to go belly up on this development. Compelling, yes, but it's not a criteria in your land development code or your comprehensive plan. Now back to my presentation. Mr. Truax objects to the changes that are being requested to reduce the lot sizes, reduce the frontage, and reduce the setbacks, and increase the number of lots. I'm going to present a quick overview of what the law is in Florida at the state level and also at this county's level, state and local law, that governs how quasi-judicial decisions are made, that governs how rezoning decisions are made. The leading case on this is the Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County versus Snyder. That was a Florida Supreme Court case in 1993. I'm sure this board is familiar with that case because it is widely quoted in your comprehensive plan and the land development code in Pasco County. For example, the Pasco County 2025 comprehensive plan at the future land use element appendix in section FLU A-2 quotes that Florida Supreme Court decision and states that what the burden is for an applicant when they're asking for a rezoning. It says a landowner seeking to rezone property or seeking a quasi-judicial approval or of any quasi-judicial application, the landowner has the burden of proving that the proposal is consistent with the comprehensive plan and complies with the procedural requirements of the land development code. At this point, the burden shifts. So if the applicant meets its burden to show that the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan and the land development code procedures, then the burden shifts to the county to show that there is a legitimate public interest or a legitimate public purpose in maintaining the status quo. Now, the comprehensive plan defines legitimate public purpose. And one of those ways is public reliance on an approved plan of development. You've heard a lot about public reliance today, and I'm going to present real evidence from the citizens in Serengeti about that public reliance. The citizens in Serengeti, the homeowners there, will tell you, and the evidence, the competent substantial evidence that we will present today will show that the homeowners in Serengeti bought their homes in reliance on this county's approval of the Serengeti Community Plan, the whole unified community plan. And the testimony of Mr. Tu and Mr. Lawson admitted that it was to be a unified community, Phase 1 and Phase 2. They saw what was on the ground. They saw phase one, which is platted, and they saw the property in phase two, which the roads were paved, the lots were laid out, electricity and facilities were put in. You've heard testimony on that today by your staff and by the applicant. So they not only relied on the county's approval and the plat and the zoning, but also what they saw on the ground. Not to mention what they also were told by the sellers of those homes, and they can speak to that. When the applicant comes to this county requesting an approval for this rezoning, the applicant has to, as I said, prove a consistency with the comp plan and with the land development code procedures, and it has to do that by presenting competent substantial evidence. There is competent substantial evidence already in the record before this board. There is competent substantial evidence in the form of this county's own professional staff who made a presentation to you today and who showed the criteria in the comprehensive plan and the land development code and went by step, provision by provision, demonstrating to this board what those criteria are. Those are the criteria that this board must focus on in making its decision whether to approve or deny this request. And its decision has to be supported by competent substantial evidence. There was talk today of entitlement. There was talk today of the property being in Res 3 land use designation and future land use designation. Now, the case that I mentioned, the Florida Supreme Court case in Snyder, Brevard County versus Snyder, spoke to that as well. And coincidentally, the county's comprehensive plan also quotes that. The county's comprehensive plan states at policy 1.9.3 that the Pasco County Comprehensive Plan sets forth the long-range potential uses of the property in the context of a lawful planning horizon and provides for a wide array of potential zoning classifications within each land use designation. A property owner is not entitled to all zoning classifications or even the most potentially dense or intense zoning classification within a land use designation. Numerous planning, timing, compatibility, public facility, and other generally acceptable planning issues affect the appropriateness of assigning a particular zoning classification or approving a particular land use regarding a particular parcel of property. So it isn't just the future land use designation. That is not the only criteria on which this board must make its decision, and a landowner is not entitled to the greatest density under that land use designation. If the county has a legitimate public purpose for maintaining the status quo, then a county is not compelled to grant a zoning request. It's not compelled to grant an upzoning or more density. What are some of those additional things that the county has to look at? Well, the Pasco County's comprehensive plan, it's at policy 1.10.1, requires the county to review every rezoning application for compatibility with existing uses and appropriate timing. Under that policy, the county has to look at the existing land uses in the community, including the densities. It has to consider existing development patterns in the community, and it also has to consider the community character. What is the community character in Serengeti? Well, the residents are here to tell you. They live there, they see it every day, and they are fact witnesses, and they are going to testify about the facts regarding the community character of Serengeti, which is their community. Now, the county's professional staff presented a report to the Development Review Committee, the same report that was presented to this board today, and that was discussed and shown on the screen. And staff went through the comprehensive plan provisions and also went through the land development code provisions at section 402.2.f, the standards of review that require a consideration of the impact of this proposal on surrounding land uses, and the provisions at 402.1.e, which is the review considerations that this board must consider, that talk about the impact of this request on the living conditions in the immediate neighborhood, that of Serengeti. Staff found that there would be an impact on Phase 1 if there were these additional lots approved in Phase 2, and that it would be a detrimental impact to the properties in Phase 1. Staff found that living conditions would be impacted because of the additional traffic created by the additional lots. Staff found that, that there was public reliance, which is one of those criteria this board has to consider, the reliance, public reliance. And staff also found that there was a legitimate public purpose to support denial based on that reliance of the approved plan for Serengeti. Where there is a legitimate public purpose for maintaining the status quo, and there is a reason for denial for this request, and the decision to deny this request would be supported by competent substantial evidence, which we are going to present today. We have expert witnesses and we have fact witnesses. So a denial of this request is supported by the evidence, is supported by a legitimate public purpose. And like the court said in the Snyder case, if there's a legitimate public purpose, then the application should be denied. And I just want to reiterate that although the applicant argues it can't sell lots the way they're configured, that's not a consideration under state or local law. I also want to point out before I bring the witnesses up that we do have a few citizen witnesses today. They are fact witnesses, and I want to make this point on the record that Florida courts have consistently held that where local lay individuals with firsthand knowledge of the vicinity who are heard in opposition at a public hearing they are as qualified as expert witnesses to offer views on factual matters related to how a proposal will affect them and their community. I want to say that again. The courts have held that lay witnesses, fact witnesses, are as qualified as expert witnesses to offer views on factual matters related to how a proposal will affect them and their community. So the testimony of the lay witnesses here today, the residents of Serengeti, is not to be taken lightly. It is competent, substantial evidence that will support a decision by this board. And their testimony, according to Board of County Commissioners of Pinellas County versus Clearwater, a 2nd District Court of Appeal case in 1983, the court found that lay witness testimony is to be accorded great weight as to their cumulative objections. So Mr. Truex is my client, and he will be testifying on the record in a few moments. We request that this board find, as staff did, as your professional staff did, found this request to be inconsistent with the comprehensive plan. We request that the board do as well and deny the request for the additional lots in Phase 2 and the reduced frontages and the reduced setbacks. Now, my first witness I'm going to call is Steve Allison, who is a professional planner. And as Mr. Allison comes forward, I would like to present into the record his resume and also his report. His report was submitted to the Development Review Committee, but I want to submit it to this board.
Second. All in favor?
Thank you.
Aye.
And I'll just want to state on the record that Mr. Allison is a professional planner with about 40 years of experience. He has a master's degree in urban planning and much experience. Thank you.
Mr. Allison, please state your name and address for the record and whether you have been sworn.
My name is Steve. Sorry. My name is Steve Allison. My mail-in address is P.O. Box 82834, Tampa. I've been having some voice issues recently, so I apologize for that, but I will struggle through this presentation.
Sir, did you say you were sworn? I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
I have been
Thank
sworn. Just to start with, a couple of reactions, amplify some of the things that Pamela Hatley said in regard to the presentation by Mr. Tew. These are just off-the-cuff observations. It was indicated that through the charts and sales of nearby properties, that a different product than what's available in Serengeti is what's hot in the market right now. My observation is that's true. But that's exactly why these folks bought their property in Serengeti. It's something different. It's something considerably different. And when, as was kind of indicated by Mr. Tew, when we go about predicting the market, we have to remember that it always does change. And with the influx of developments of that type coming into this area, Serengeti over time may become even more unique and desirable. Secondly, I was actually glad to hear that Metro is retaining interest in numerous lots in Phase 1. That keeps them invested in the community. But given what the residents have experienced with the participation of Metro historically, I don't know what assurance they have that they plan to maintain the existing development standards that are applicable to those Phase 1 lots. Finally, and Pamela hit on this very effectively from a legal standpoint, but we're not here making a marketing decision. We're here making a planning decision based upon specific criteria that exists in your land development code and in your comprehensive plan. I had submitted, I don't know when it became a part of the record. I know it was a part of the record at the DRC. I don't think it was actually discussed at that point. But I performed a planning analysis. I don't know whether all of you have seen that at this point. I'm getting quizzical looks that suggest that you probably have not, but it is, has been introduced as a part of the record for several months. Given that it doesn't appear that there's universal familiarity with it, I'll highlight some of what I think are the key findings. And I won't go into reading the entire report because that would not only take too long, but would probably bore everyone to uncomfortable levels. Serengeti homeowners made their purchase decisions when not only the plans of the developer, but a master PUD had been approved by this board, not these particular individuals, but by this governmental body. That was in place. That was part of the evidence available. Whether every one of those owners went and looked at that individually, I don't have the ability to say, but I think it's fair to presume that they had some expectation that this development was going to be developed as shown in multiple documents. So to buy into that and have that changed many years later is a situation that is not unique in the sense that large long-term PUDs commonly change. That certainly occurs with virtually any MPUD or PUD of that nature. It's the nature or it's the extent and type of change here that makes it truly unique in my many years in this field. The general area of this request, the existing Phase 1 Serengeti, exhibits a quasi-rural character. Development is relatively sporadic. Large tracts are currently undeveloped. There's environmentally sensitive parcels, both within Serengeti and in the general area. There's numerous physical features that describe the Serengeti neighborhood itself. Of course, the most notable are the vast expanses of wetlands, but also, and certainly those contribute to the quasi-rural feel, but there's also unique infrastructure features such as the wooden bridges, the old-style street lights that mimic gas. There's things about the area, the homes, the way they're platted with the setbacks and lot sizes, it allows for very large building footprints, which in turn contributes to the likelihood that homes will be custom built. They have a lot of space within their building footprint to build. That's among the reasons, not the sole reason, but certainly among the reasons why I think every house but one in the existing community has a 3-car garage. It's just part of the large home character. The nature of this particular request is quite unusual. As I said, modifications are to be expected, but they rarely propose such a fundamental shift to the overall development concept originally envisioned. particularly where substantial portions of the overall development are already developed. They bought into something, they thought that was good. Now the rug's being pulled out from under them and saying, I'm sorry, but we're going to do something, whereas you have 15,000 square foot minimum lots, at least as of before I came here today. There was a proposal for 5,500 square foot lots. Now, there were some statements made about compromise lot sizes by Mr. Chu in his presentation. Those are good. I don't think those have been communicated with the residents here. Maybe there's room for further dialogue, but that certainly hasn't occurred to my knowledge to date. One of the initial provisions of your land development code in 102.2.C4 is to implement a development review process that is equitable in terms of preservation of the rights of property owners. The property rights of the Phase 1 homeowners are directly undermined by this proposal. They made a good faith decision to purchase their property in reliance upon a publicly available master plan that had been formally approved again by this board. Certainly no zoning plan is set in stone, and over time you do expect some modifications, but to change the very essence and character of the development at this point in its development history is highly unusual and does not respect their existing property rights, in my view. In terms of compatibility issues, that's really the key in a lot of zoning decisions. Current standards treat the property as a single integrated property or a single integrated development. The proposal really bifurcates it into two very distinct and separate, yet they share the same infrastructure. If alternative access to Phase 2 were possible, we would likely not be having this particular conversation. We might be having other conversations, but if they were able to access other than through the existing Phase 1, and I know that would be difficult and expensive, but if that were the case, they might even come more close to realizing their maximum Res 3 development potential. I feel that compatibility is not achieved by the present modification. It would undermine a currently stable and harmonious land use relationship. Phase 2 development would substantially lessen the characteristic and intrinsic open feel of the overall development. Impacts of the new development would pose unwarranted and inappropriate impacts on existing Phase 1 development, and these concepts are elsewhere developed in this. And I can see that this report is getting more boring by the moment, but they are discussed in multiple places in this document. And again, it is part of the record. I think the proposal fails on the transitional site planning concepts. Most particular among those is that you will rarely, if ever, see a development, and Mr. Chu, I think, even acknowledged this to some degree. You will very rarely, I don't recollect a situation where the least intensive portions of development are built up front in a single closed street network with the higher intensity uses at the rear. You know, if this were a mixed-use development, you wouldn't put single-family homes up at the front and your neighborhood Publix at the back. You put your Publix at the front and the the single-family homes in the back. The same applies with this kind of disparity in residential development. It is completely backwards to any generally accepted site planning concept within the planning profession. In addition, when you do have transitions, and again, these are backwards, but you usually accomplish those transitions gradually. You might start up front with some townhomes and transition into some 5,000 square foot detached lots, and then in the rear, you might have your estate lots. Here we have 15,000 square foot lots, bingo, 5,500 square foot lots. There is no appropriate transition in lot sizes or use for that matter. I don't want to eat up any more time because I think there's very compelling testimony from a number of residents. I've heard it. I met with a couple of you during this process. When I heard their reasons for why they chose Serengeti, for why Serengeti is the reason they live in Pasco County, for why they've searched the entire Bay Area and said, this is it. This is my dream. This is what I want. I want to leave plenty of time for them. I will answer any questions if you have them.
Commissioner Mariano?
Just one quick question. You were quoting a study. I've got something that got put in front of my desk. It talks about the Journal of Housing Economics. Was that the one you're just?
That's from Commissioner Starkey. Yeah,
That's from you?
Yeah, it's something else.
All right, so can we get a copy of that? At some point, before this meeting's over at some point?
Pamela, you have a copy of the report, my report to submit? We gave you one at the neighborhood meeting.
Are you asking for the record that, or the study that we submitted to the record, that Mr. Allison's study?
Yes, because I don't know if I have it on my list.
I don't
Items
have it.
here.
It was submitted into the record, I'm sorry. It was submitted into the record, I believe, at the DRC by the community's representative at that time. I think I might have 2 or 3 more copies with me. I'll check, but,
If you give us one copy, we can have our staff make a copy.
okay, sure.
Thank you. Thank
I have a general question.
Sure.
So, well, I've been at it up here for 6 years, and then I was on the LPA as a school board member for a few years before that. It seems to me I've seen an awful lot of rezonings, especially when the market changed. Would you agree that a lot of projects, in order to not go belly up, or for whatever reason, just desires in the marketplace have come in for rezonings?
Well, I will acknowledge that this is a time where I think a lot of pent-up demand seems to be flooding the, I mean, I'm as busy as I can possibly be, busier than I want to be, and almost every engineering firm I know is in the same boat. So the market is robust, without question.
And lots of projects are getting rezoned, I mean, because we see it all the time. I think we had some today. So,
I had 3 last night.
yeah, so, okay, thank you.
Sure.